Have you ever got fooled on April Fool's Day? Or have you ever played a prank on someone on April Fool's Day? Well, I've been on both ends as a little child, and let me tell you, I have enjoyed every bit of it. Creating imaginative stories and seeing people fall for it is just something I love. And if you enjoy it too, then the story that I have today is just what you will like. The Open Window by Saki is a satirical comedy. And before I tell you any more, let's look at the works of the writer. H. Munro was born in Burma, now Myanmar, in 1870. He worked there as a journalist before gaining fame as a short story writer under the pen name famously as Saki. His works, which include the classic stories Supplementary and The Open Window, most of his stories are satirical commentaries on the Edwardian society and culture. H. Munro's, or Saki, The Open Window, brilliantly portrays how one's nerves affect his or her personality. As Frampton embarks on a trip intended as a nerve cure, he finds himself in an unfamiliar situation that ultimately has a negative effect on his seemingly nervous personality. The Open Window by Saki. "My aunt will be down presently, Mr. Nuttle," said a very self-possessed young lady of 15. "In the meantime, you must try and put up with me." Frampton Nuttle endeavored to say something which should duly flatter the niece of the moment without unduly discounting the aunt that was to come. Privately, he doubted more than ever whether these formal visits of succession of total strangers would do much towards helping the nerve cure which he was supposed to be undergoing. "I know how it will be," his sister had said when he was preparing to migrate to this rural retreat. "You will bury yourself down there and not speak to a living soul, and your nerves will be worse than ever from moping. I shall just give you letters of introduction to all the people I know there. Some of them, as far as I can remember, were quite nice." Frampton wondered whether Mrs. Sappleton, the lady to whom he was presenting one of the letters of introduction, came into the nice division. "Do you know many of the people round here?" asked the niece when she judged that they had had sufficient silent communion. "Hardly a soul," said Frampton. "My sister was staying here some 4 years ago, and she gave me letters of introduction to some of the people here." He made the last statement in a tone of distinct regret. "Then you know practically nothing about my aunt," pursued the self-obsessed young lady. "Only her name and address," admitted the caller. He was wondering whether Mrs. Sappleton was in the married or widowed state. An undefinable something about the room seems to suggest masculine habitation. "Her great tragedy happened just 3 years ago," said the child. "That would be since your sister's time." "Her tragedy?" asked Frampton. Somehow in this restful country spot, tragedies seemed out of place. "You may wonder why we keep that window wide open on an October afternoon," said the niece, indicating a large French window that opened to the lawn. "It's quite warm for the time of the year," said Frampton. "But has that window got anything to do with the tragedy?" Out through that window, 3 years ago to a day, her husband and her 2 young brothers went off for their day's shooting. They never came back. In crossing the moor to their favorite shooting ground, they were all 3 engulfed in a treacherous piece of bog. It had been that dreadful wet summer, and places that were safe in other years gave way suddenly without warning. Their bodies were never recovered. That was the dreadful part of it. Here the child's voice lost its self-possessed note and became falteringly human. Poor aunt always thinks that they will come back someday, they and the little brown spaniel that was lost with them, and walk in at that window just as they used to do. That is why the window is kept open every evening till it is quite dusk. Poor dear aunt. She has often told me how they went out, her husband with his white waterproof coat over his arm, and Ronnie, her youngest brother, singing, "Bertie, why do you bound?" As he always did to tease her, because she said it got on her nerves. Do you know, sometimes on still, quiet evenings like this, I almost get a creepy feeling that they will all walk in through that window. Well, that is quite a tragedy. Or is it really? We shall read more to find that out. But let's understand the details of this story. Frampton Nuttle suffers from a nervous condition and has come to spend some time alone. His sister has set up introductions for him with a few members of the community. His first visit is to Sappleton House, where he meets the 15-year-old Vera. Vera is Mrs. Sappleton's niece. She keeps Mr. Nuttle company while Mrs. Sappleton is upstairs getting ready to meet her new guest. Upon hearing that he has not met the Sappletons, Vera extends some information about the family to Mr. Nuttle. She says that 3 years ago to the date, Mrs. Sappleton's husband and 2 younger brothers went out on a hunting trip and they just never returned. They drowned in a treacherous piece of bog and their bodies were never recovered. She goes into detail about the clothes they were wearing, the dog that accompanied them, and the song that Mrs. Sappleton's brother sang upon their return. Vera tells Mr. Nuttle that her aunt has kept the French window open ever since, in the belief that her husband and brothers that went on a walk will come back through the open window one day, one moment, alive and well. Don't you think this is quite a bit for a man suffering from a nervous condition to take? How will Mr. Nuttle take the story? We need to read further to find out. On that note, I shall say goodbye, and I will return for more captivating stories in the future. I hope you had fun. See you soon. Goodbye. Tutormate. For more amazing video lectures, download the free app on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store.